Guys, what is going on tonight? How y'all doing on this Thursday evening? Thank God tomorrow is Friday. This is the Club with the Man 1993, and we are live for a special live stream. This time involving not Raw, not SmackDown, not NXT, not any part of WWE, but AEW. That's right. We're going to do a top 5 special tonight, really quick before I go to bed. For my top 5 All Elite Wrestling best storylines of 2020. Again, I did my best, the best of 2020 so far for WWE. We're going to do one more for WWE, and also 2 more after this for AEW. I have one planned for the best matches, which that one's going to be a top 10. But tonight, we're going to talk about storylines. Now, just because I'm doing only the 5 best storylines, it does not mean that everything in AEW was absolutely perfect in 2020. There's obviously still some kinks, still some stars that, things didn't work out for, and some stuff that was just like, it was fine. Didn't turn out to be what it hoped to be, but it was still fine. But there wasn't too many storylines or too many things to me that really stood out as being like god-awful nasty, if you know what I mean. A couple little things, but nothing really, too much. I would say the one biggest letdown for me from AEW was definitely the feud with Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara. Mainly because of what happened at All Out with Matt Hardy taking that nasty bump and whatnot, and the way they handled that. Again, that was a tough one to watch. But I don't really have too many, negatives to say when coming with these lists. So that's why, for AEW, I stuck more with the positives. Now, I was trying to make this first one for storylines a top 10 list. I actually only came up with about 8 or 9, though. So because of that, I only cut it down to 5. Before I list the 5 that I went with in the end, I will just briefly run off a couple of honorable mentions here. One definitely that I was strongly considering, that probably would be my number 6, is the build to the storyline with Cody Rhodes and Lance Archer, leading up to the TNT Championship tournament finals at Double or Nothing. I really liked how they built up Lance Archer as an unstoppable monster and like a true threat in that tournament. I thought that the build that was excellent, especially with Jake the Snake Roberts by his side. They made us feel like we were watching the Brock Lesnar of AEW. Of course, Lance Archer has been booked a little inconsistently ever since, but that storytelling, that build, the hype was great. I honestly would have been okay with that hype actually leading to that TNT title match at Double or Nothing. I was okay with that being the main event of that show if it came down to it. But of course, we had the Stadium Stampede fight that show, so that did not happen. There was that one. I definitely give a little bit of credit to Jon Moxley and MJF. I did like how, MJF was trying to be a little bit like a politician to plead his case for him being a world champion. My thing, though, about that feud was that I felt it could have gone on longer, and that's the thing for a couple of these feuds. The feud could have extended past the first match, I felt. But that one was like, MJF had already been very well established. And that one not continuing didn't quite hit the high note for me to make my top 5. So that's why that didn't make it. I considered also MJF and the Inner Circle, but that one's only just getting started at the end of the year. So that one has a lot of mileage left in it, which is why I did not include that one as well. And one other that I almost included, even though, and that's the thing too about these feuds I listed. The matches, some were good, some of them were not the most memorable from AEW that was involved in these feuds, but the build is what I'm focusing on in this. So I want to give some credit to the feud between Big Swole and Dr. Britt Baker, because that feud, the build for it was during a time where Dr. Britt Baker was injured. She had that knee injury that kept her out for several months throughout the summer. It's between Double or Nothing and her All Out. Even for a few weeks after All Out, she was still taking a little bit more time to recover. But what I liked about that build is the fact that even though Britt was hurt, they still gave her things to do and made her, in a sense, feel relevant still. She's still benefited, even though she was on the sidelines. Now, I will mention, of course, that as we talked about in my Dynamite review last night, that I felt they really missed the opportunity to drop the ball with having her lose to Nyla Rose in this Eliminator tournament. That was not a good move, I would say, on AEW's part. I thought it was going to lead to the rematch between, well, at least for the United States side, for the championship for the United States side. I thought it was going to lead to the rematch between Thunder Rosa and Dr. Britt Baker from Beach Break, which was an awesome match. But I gotta give that one credit because it showed that AEW can still make stars, stars, even though they're out with an injury and can't compete in the ring currently. So those are a few honorable mentions that I considered but didn't make the top 5. But definitely would have made my top 10. Top 9, because that's only 9 in total. But again, these 5, I felt like, even though most of them consist of the same people, one thing that's popular of these 5 is that it built new stars. I would say, let me see here, looking at the list, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 5 of them, I'd say, established a new star. One of them, was 2 guys that are already pretty well established. But still, it was still a great build, and to what it led to as well. So before I read off this list, and I don't think this is going to be as long. I think maybe an hour tops, maybe for this stream, maybe shorter. I'm not sure. Before I talk about those 5, let me first check the live chat, see what you guys have to say about some of the best storylines between in AEW. We got JR. What's up, JR? And we also got Mark. What's up, Mark? And Tyler as well. Mark's given 2 storylines. Now a third one. Best storyline: Cody Rhodes and MJF, Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley, and Kenny Omega and Pac. Not a bad list. Definitely can say several of those are definitely on this top 5 list. Definitely one of them that's not on the top 5 list. One of their matches actually was on my top 10 for top 10 matches, which again, I have those graphics done. I just don't know when I'm going to do that stream. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow, probably not Saturday, maybe Sunday. We'll see. But definitely that'll be the next one I do. So again, it's going to be this one, matches, and then basically like a miscellaneous for WWE, like superstars and like a couple other little categories I did really do like big top 10 lists for. And we'll do the same for AEW as well. And then we'll wrap up these best of 2020 streams and get back to some other things. So yeah. Like I said, I love doing these streams, guys. But like I said, they're just a pain to put together, especially with these graphics I do. And half the time I'm tired after work. Like even this stream tonight, I was prepared to do it. I went down to watch my Thursday night shows that I usually watch. But then after it was over, I got sleepy. So I had to take a shower to, give me the energy to do this stream. So I believe I am recharged, got the second wind, and we're going to roll here. So let's roll into it. We'll start off with my number 5. Best storyline of the year for AEW in 2020. And we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the year, which led to the championship match at AEW Revolution. The Club of the Man 1993 presents AEW's Top 5 Storylines of 2020. Number 5. Jon Moxley outsmarts the Inner Circle. So we started off the year for the world title picture. Chris Jericho was Le Champion, and of course he had just developed, the Inner Circle once AEW Dynamite took off in October of 2019. And his first feud was obviously against some more established stars, as several of the world title feuds were pretty much done so that way. The first couple of, months for the championship feud. Some, young talent was getting some opportunities against Jericho, but it was definitely more focused on, the more established stars, like the Jon Moxleys or the Cody Rhodes, and, a couple others that were already well known before AEW. It wasn't until after Revolution, I'd say, we started getting some more, stars that were built, some new fresher faces, in which opportunities arose for some fresh faces. But I will give credit to this Jericho and Moxley feud, as it was definitely my number 5 feud of the year for 2020. So, what I gotta say about this feud is that I think it began with obviously Jon Moxley, pursuing after he had beaten Kenny Omega in that lights out match at Full Gear. Now that he got one of the big guns out of the way, he was eyeing up for the AEW World Title, as it's his mission to put AEW on the map. He basically cut that promo when he made his debut at Double or Nothing back in 2019, AEW's first ever show. And of course, it all came full circle with this match here. So, Moxley started targeting Jericho. But Jericho's idea was to keep Moxley, behind him and try to get him to join the Inner Circle. He offered him several things, including a car, a very nice looking car, I will say. But Moxley did not, reject his offer to join the Inner Circle right away. So it gave him a couple weeks, I believe it was, before Moxley would make a decision. And keep in mind, when Jon Moxley first came to AEW, I felt he had more of like a heelish side to him. I feel like it wasn't until he won the world title, or at least, had turned on Chris Jericho when he almost joined the Inner Circle, that he had more of like a babyface side to him. He had more of like a heelish, malicious side to him. Obviously, just bringing out the character he wanted to bring in and gain the respect for the fans. Especially, in his podcast with Jericho he had around AEW, where he even mentioned how, obviously he started fresh and he come across some very hokey booking at the end of his run in WWE. He wanted to earn the fans' respect back. So, of course, probably him having more of like a heelish side to his character was fine with him going to AEW. But this, of course, transitioned him into a top babyface and being the top champion for the year, basically, in all of wrestling. So obviously he played some mind games with Jericho for a few weeks and basically said he would consider it. And they had that segment, I remember, on Dynamite, where basically Moxley was accepting the invite. And just when you thought, the show was about to end and that everything was cool, which honestly, I'll be honest, if I could change one little thing, I would have actually had Moxley in the Inner Circle for maybe like a couple weeks. Like, actually have him there before he turned his back on Jericho. Just to kind of play the mind games a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper, but, but of course he basically, the show, it's kind of like how we used to praise NXT for. The show's going off the air and then boom, wait a minute, not done yet. That's how it was for this. Moxley basically said, haha, I'm just kidding, I never wanted to join your group, which then of course kicked, had Moxley turn on Jericho, and then I think Jericho spiked the eye of Moxley with one of the steel spikes of his jacket. I think Moxley did it to, Santana, I believe it was. And eventually it led to a very well done match at AEW Revolution where Moxley won, and he had cut that promo afterwards, obviously, about the past year-long journey and what's meant for him and whatnot. Obviously, like I said, he was frustrated. He didn't mention with WWE, but he was frustrated with WWE, and he basically just wanted to refresh his character. And obviously, him staying in WWE was not going to give him that. So obviously, him coming full circle by winning the AEW World Title, just the second person to ever hold the AEW World Championship, I thought it was a good story. Of course, the feud kind of continued a little bit afterwards as he continued to feud with other members of the Inner Circle, which led to a kind of weak, no-holds-barred world title match between him and Jake Hager. So he technically continued to feud with the Inner Circle for a little bit longer. I'm just surprised that Jericho never got his rematch. Quite frankly, again, I feel like he should have gone after a rematch at least. He could have had it on Dynamite or even like a special. But remember, at the time, this was right before the pandemic hit, so that's what kind of affected it. But still a very good feud. Definitely one of my favorites, and that's why it is my number 5 for best storylines of the year for AEW in 2020. So we have that one. Number 4 on this list is a feud that I personally enjoyed. Definitely after hearing Jericho's opinions on this guy on his podcast. And they had one match on Dynamite, one match I believe at Fyter Fest, and then it finished up with a kind of mixed bag felt match at AEW All Out, which I feel like was more so of like a character match, as that's what this feud basically was. It was a character feud. It got over a guy that really was never supposed to get as over as he was, or made into as big of a star as he was. Obviously, a different match that we will talk about in my top 10 best matches in AEW in 2020 will come up. But I felt like this was the feud that made someone who really was not supposed to be a star an actual star. And one obviously that, even though Chris Jericho was not a fan of this guy at first, he kind of, stuck his hands into it, basically, wanted to make this guy into a star because he saw how very well received he was by the fans. So, let's talk about this next one. My number 4 for best storylines of the year in AEW in 2020. Number 4. Chris Jericho makes Orange Cassidy a star. So, Orange Cassidy came in at the beginning of the year. He basically was just, the third group member of Best Friends with Chuck Taylor and Trent. A spoiler alert, if you don't mind, but for one of the matches in my top 10 matches of 2020 in AEW was his match with Pac at Revolution. That was a match that basically opened up our eyes. That's like, holy crap, Orange Cassidy actually can be a star. And that definitely caught our eyes. And they continued to kind of go back and forth with him. And then I even said for a while, he'd make a great feud with Chris Jericho. And that's what we got for, I think, 14 weeks, I think the feud lasted, in the summer of 2020, as Chris Jericho feuded with Orange Cassidy and made him a star. Obviously, at the time, Jericho's strong suit was definitely the microphone. As, his gold promos he was able to cut as just being just an arrogant prick, bullying Orange Cassidy for, who he is. Even, go as far as having orange juice being squeezed on him and such, and a bunch of other things he went out of his way to humiliate Orange Cassidy. Obviously, Cassidy's mind games of, the kicks to the legs, or, the hands in his pocket, just his swagger obviously just annoyed Jericho. But Cassidy used it to his advantage. And then they had 3 matches throughout the summer. I think they were both just basically just one-on-one matches, and then the Mimosa Mayhem match at All Out. I believe Jericho won the first one. Cassidy came up short, but it left us wanting a rematch. The segment, obviously, that was the best part of this feud, I would still say, was definitely that debate. That debate where basically, obviously, again, Cassidy doesn't talk much. Jericho can talk, and that's one of his strong suits. Cassidy obviously had something to prove with what he can talk about. Obviously, he catches attention, but just leaving, himself silent until he had one of the better things to say that just made us catch our eyes like, oh my gosh, this guy's actually pretty cool. I mean, obviously, he kept himself quiet, but obviously, again, this feud, like I said, just built him into a star. Especially when he answered that question about global warming. He went from a man of very few words to just showing off to be a freaking genius and just winning the debate. Again, we always say, they can't quite take away, wrestling when it comes to sports entertainment. Although Orange Cassidy can wrestle, he's more of a character gimmick. He's going to get more attention for his character rather than his wrestling abilities. Even though his in-ring work is quite unique. But like I said, it's more a part of his character. And then he even, had told off Chris Jericho. And being Jericho in his own game, when he beat Jericho on the microphone with that debate. Cassidy would beat Jericho in their second match, which I believe the first match they had was at I'm trying to remember, was at Fyter Fest. I think that's the one where Cassidy lost. They had a rematch which Cassidy won with a roll up, and then they had this Mimosa Mayhem match where the goal of the match was just to knock your opponent in a pool of Mimosa Mayhem, which is a mixture of orange juice and the bubbly. That match was meh. I wouldn't say it was horrible, but it was not really as good. But like I said, it was just a decent match to finish off what was nothing but a character feud. So yeah, it was a kind of a little bit of a weak finish to it, but it still made Orange Cassidy a star. Credit where credit is due, of course, to Chris Jericho, who again, even in real life, admitted that he didn't think much of Orange Cassidy at all. But obviously, he gained the respect for Orange Cassidy to make him into a bigger star. And that's why I enjoy this feud, and that's why it is my number 4 for best storylines in AEW in 2020. Chris Jericho and Orange Cassidy, which Chris Jericho, of course, made Orange Cassidy a star. Speaking of making new stars, number 3 is a feud that took place in the fall. And this is one of those instances where, well, let's basically take Jon Moxley. When he was Dean Ambrose in WWE, he basically earned his way to a match with Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 32. Obviously, it was a letdown, but, that match happened because he made it happen based off of the storyline they had with him in that triple threat for number contendership for the world title with him, Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar. The same thing kind of happened here, except this time, he was a champion, and a good real-life friend of his was the challenger. A feud that wasn't really meant to happen. A guy who basically earned himself a contract, coming in and having a match with Cody Rhodes for a TNT Championship, and earning himself the main event spot in the pay-per-view. His time has not come yet as a world champion, but it will come as a certain man, I feel, made himself a star. Number 3. Eddie Kingston makes himself a star. Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley have a history going back to their days in CZW. They are very similar in styles as far as, more so like hardcore, deathmatch type people. People who just literally just grew up with, the same style of wrestling throughout their wrestling careers. And, I didn't know much about Eddie Kingston mostly before this feud, but one thing that stands out about Eddie Kingston is, like Orange Cassidy, he's not really as known for his in-ring work. But Eddie Kingston is just a god on the microphone. And we saw it in this feud. As I said earlier, Eddie Kingston had a match with no contract in AEW during the summer against Cody Rhodes. That match earned him a spot in the basically in AEW. He signed a contract and he ended up being runner-up in that number 1 contenders casino battle royale at AEW All Out. And he was runner-up as Lance Archer would go on to win that feud. Now, of course, he's had some random thing with, the Lucha Bros, and even, of course, also the Butcher and the Blade. Which, that's a little bit random, but you can't take away how he basically made himself a star just purely with his microphone work. I believe it was Lance Archer who was, as I believe they had to, was it Archer or was it somebody else? Yeah, I think it was Archer, who got sick with the virus, having to delay their match. So, to give Jon Moxley something to do, they had Eddie Kingston step in and basically accept an open challenge from Moxley on an episode of Dynamite for the world title. And the match was good, and even, of course, the storytelling and the promos, again, that Eddie Kingston is able to cut believable, mentioning the idea of how that, I lost, but I never tapped out. I just passed out. Jon Moxley truly could not keep me down. And just from that alone, Eddie Kingston earned himself another world title shot. Except this time it was at the main event of the best pay-per-view that AEW may have done, probably has done so far, Full Gear. In an I Quit match that, again, these guys had to go to their hardcore styles to defeat the other. And it was great. It was one of those instances where it was like a star that was not meant to happen happened. And yes, Eddie Kingston may have been, put down to a little bit of obscurity ever since. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of what's been going on with him and Pac and him and Archer because it just doesn't make sense to me. But again, you can't take away his underrated talent, especially, like I said, his promo skills. This man may be one of the best on the microphone this day. And this feud with him and Jon Moxley made Eddie Kingston himself a star in AEW. And that's why it is my number 3 for best storylines of the year in 2020 for AEW. Number 2. This is a storyline that was mainly at the beginning of the year. Now, I wish, personally, they would dig a little more into this and would have continued this feud in some way or another. Once or twice, they've teased something more with it, but they've never really gone through with it, which disappoints me a little bit because I loved the build to this. They have those few moments in the year, which one of them involves my number 1, of course. But for this number 2, this was the feud that began in 2019 and continued into 2020, leading to a match at Revolution. It was a feud to me that made that more established, seasoned out, the best heel, not just in this company, but maybe in this entire wrestling industry. The storytelling was just spot off the charts. Also led to another one of the best segments of the year, and definitely also one of the best main events on AEW television on Dynamite for TNT as well. I love this feud. Again, I wish this feud would have continued in some ways. Maybe we'll explore it again another day, who knows, based off the history, but can't take away the build. The build was just awesome. And I mentioned how this person was already seasoned out when he feuded for the world title going into All Out, but this is a feud that really just really grinded the gears in MJF. As we got my number 2 for best storyline of the year for 2020. Number 2. MJF overpowers Cody Rhodes. We instantly knew when MJF came out, when he first came to AEW, when AEW first began, that this man was going to be a star. This man had the capability of being one of the best heels in the company. Again, basically AEW's version of The Miz. Not the best known in the ring, but when he's cutting the right type of promos with the right passion, speaking that truth, and just being a very convincing asshole, you got one of the best heels in the industry. And that's just some heel booking that I completely respect. Yes, he has to cheat, but like the Revival, or, FTR, of course, down in AEW, their psychology is off the charts, and just makes them, like someone with a very simple, not the best, most flashy, or more of like an old school wrestling style in the ring. It makes them look even better while having their microphone skills to back them up. And that is what happened, of course, in this Cody Rhodes and MJF feud. This feud started back at AEW Full Gear in 2019, in which MJF threw in the towel for Cody Rhodes and then low blowed him afterwards, because the stipulation was if Cody Rhodes lost that AEW World Title match to Chris Jericho, he would never challenge for the World Championship again. And that happened because of MJF throwing in the towel and then betraying their longtime friendship. And it led to the build to this. Cody Rhodes obviously, wanted to get his hands on MJF. MJF, though, did not allow that, as he went and got basically placed some stipulations as to how Cody Rhodes would be able to fight him eventually. He said the match would happen at Revolution on 3 conditions. 1, Cody Rhodes cannot touch MJF until their match at Revolution. Number 2, he had to take 10 lashes on live TV. And 3, he also had to defeat Wardlow in a steel cage match. And after he does all that, he will fight him at Revolution. And again, MJF, just the fact alone that Cody Rhodes was not even allowed to put a finger on MJF, that was, of course, indeed, one of the toughest things. That was one of the things that really helped bring out MJF, as he just played that amazing prick that you wanted Cody to punch him in the face, but you knew that the moment he did, the match was off, and he couldn't. And MJF did whatever he could to push Cody's buttons, basically like Chris Jericho in 2012 with CM Punk. Of course, the best segment from this storyline, no doubt about it, was the 10 lashes. Obviously, again, pushing Cody to just want to beat the crap out of MJF, as it basically reminded, if anybody has watched The Passion of Jesus Christ, it basically in some ways reminded me of the scourging scene. Obviously, again, MJ was just trying to make Cody Rhodes just snap, put him through a lot of pain. He even had Dustin Rhodes and Brandy Rhodes just out there supporting him and just trying to tell him to call it off. But Cody toughened it out and just took the 10 lashes, as it was slowly but emotionally, it was just a tough thing to watch, but it was so freaking effective. It was just like storytelling at its finest. Just a absolute masterpiece. Cody took the lashes, and MJF thought he was going to get away with having Cody give in and ruin his chances for having the match at Revolution. But he didn't. And then it came down to the steel cage match. I believe it was like a week and a half or 2.5 weeks before Revolution against Wardlow. Awesome match. It was actually Wardlow's one-on-one in-ring debut in AEW, I believe it was also, and it was an awesome match, especially that finish where he did that moonsault off the top of the cage, catching Wardlow and hitting the crossroads or the Cody cutter on him to get the victory. And MJF, was not able to keep Cody Rhodes away, as he stuck to his gut, and he got the match at Revolution. And the match was good. MJF though won with hitting Cody in the face with the diamond ring. But then the feud just ended. The right person went over with MJF. As I said before, that established him as probably the best heel in the company. But this feud could have still continued. They could have had MJF, still lurking around, taunting Cody, of course, with the I pinned Cody Rhodes shirt that he wore the first week or so after he defeated Cody Rhodes. They could have teased something there, and that's why I for the longest time thought that MJF was going to be the one to dethrone Jon Moxley. And eventually it would lead to Cody Rhodes basically getting that one chance against the one man who was the one who has stopped him from getting a world title shot again, because he threw in the towel. And Cody Rhodes would win the world title off of MJF. That did not happen, though, of course. But I feel like this is a feud that could have still continued in some ways and led to another match. just like I said about Jericho and Moxley, which is again, I also continue to say it's something not MJF, AEW could definitely improve on, is not being afraid to extend storylines to multiple you know pay per view matches. But again, this is the feud that just opened the door wide for MJF, and we all knew he could be one of the best heels in the company. They took the cuffs off him, and he went out the way and did it with this feud. So that's why that is my number 2 storyline of the year for 2020. Number 1 is a feud that I feel in some ways, as of now I'm hoping so, is not over. It basically took up just about all of 2020, and you can kind of make the case and say that it's still going on in 2021. It was a simple story with one guy who already had high expectations, but wasn't finding his footing, and somebody was still trying to become known and find their footing. And they both were built well in their own ways as a tag team. And then at the end of the year, went their separate ways, and they've had one one-on-one match on pay-per-view so far. But you better expect a world title match between these two at some point by the end of 2021. Who could that be? Let's find out. This is my number 1 best storyline of the year in AEW in 2020. And it goes to... And the number 1 storyline in AEW in 2020 is the saga of Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page. This is my number 1 storyline of the year, which involved some tag team wrestling storytelling. We've said for our longest time, in WWE, you can't just throw random tag teams together just because. Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page proved to be 2 big stars that came together for a tag team just to help elevate each other more in AEW. Hangman Adam Page was kind of like the fresh face that not many people knew about, that got a shot for the AEW World title against Chris Jericho and was still vanilla, still trying to find himself. Kenny Omega, though, on the other hand, was basically a top star with high expectations that everyone expected from him when he first came to AEW to do his runs in New Japan and so forth. But obviously, they held back on Kenny Omega until, of course, recently. But obviously, they were both kind of like, coming from polar opposite directions that came together basically to help bring out the best in each other. As what happened at either the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021 when they won the World Tag titles off of SCU. They'll go on to have several great matches, such as against the likes of the Young Bucks at Revolution. We'll definitely talk about that match at some point. Believe Santana and Ortiz, best friends. Think against Dark Order. SCU, I believe at some point also. FTR, and of course, when they dropped the titles, well, they dropped the FTR, but like I said, they had a lot of great matches. But again, the story remained the same. Hangman Adam Page developed his own thing. Kenny Omega had his own thing going on for him. And I love the storytelling they told when obviously the Young Bucks didn't really trust Kenny Omega accepting Hangman Adam Page at first into the Elite. And then, of course, with the FTR's tactics, it drove Hangman a wedge between the friendship of Hangman Adam Page and the Young Bucks. And obviously, Kenny Omega himself as well found himself stuck in the middle before realizing that he wanted to go on and get his own singles glory. He turned his back on Hangman Adam Page, even though it was not as, dramatic. I expected like a little bit of some type of like a physical attack on him. They basically just it looked more like they shook hands and went their own ways, as they would each be built well in their respective matches, leading to their match at AEW Full Gear 2020. That was an excellent opening match, and eventually it led to Kenny Omega winning the world title. Hangman Adam Page, though, in the meantime, has gone off to, try to, find himself on his own, even though he has been very well developed. He's had run-ins with the likes of the Dark Order, trying to get him to join. He has, of course, a few going on right now with Big Money Matt Hardy as well, and Private Party. So these guys, I feel like throughout the whole year, came together to found themselves with Kenny Omega being the cleaner again, and Hangman Adam Page developed himself to a solo riding cowboy, drinking some alcohol and whatnot. And, my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way too, the story is not over. It's still going to go on, and it's going to eventually lead to Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page for the world title. And my prediction, I think Hangman Adam Page is going to be the one to dethrone Kenny Omega at some point later on this year. It'll come full story with him being the first person, one of the first two people to get a shot at that world title when he fought Chris Jericho at All Out 2019, and he came up short. And again, he just wasn't being looked at as like a big name yet. But obviously, since then he has had some matches and he's developed the character, and of course, his story with Kenny Omega as a tag team champion and whatnot. Again, it all will come full circle with that long-term storytelling when that match eventually happens, when Hangman Adam Page dethrones Kenny Omega. Just some excellent long-term storytelling, and it lasted the entire year also. And like I said, both these men found themselves by the ends of the year, and again, this view came to 2021, and that is why, of course, this is my best storyline of the year in AEW, the Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page saga. And guys, that being said, that's going to do it. Those are my top 5 best storylines of the year in AEW in 2020. Just to read off them one more time. We have Jon Moxley and the Inner Circle, leading to Jon Moxley gaining to the AEW World Championship at AEW Revolution 2020. Chris Jericho makes Orange Cassidy a star throughout the summer of 2020. Eddie Kingston made himself a star in the fall of 2020. MJF overpowers Cody Rhodes in their very well done feud as well to make MJF a serious top heel. And number 1 was the saga between Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page. And that does it. Again, the next one, of course, will be the top 10 matches. I already have that list listed up. Obviously, I did kind of spoil one of them that we'll talk about in the next special live stream. But other than that, that's going to do it. I will be up here live tomorrow night for my SmackDown review. I'm going to try over the weekend also to get my Fastlane card predictions done. Maybe WrestleMania 37 card predictions done as well. Next week, of course, I will also be doing my AEW Revolution preview and predictions for that March 7th pay-per-view that following Sunday. So that's yet to come as well. And, just stay tuned for more content on the channel. As always, guys, let me see here. We have Tyler saying how Jericho should have got his rematch last year for a world title. I agree. Best debut of 2020 for AEW was Sting. Definitely, for sure, yes. Maybe one of the best segments of the year was Sting's debut at Winter is Coming on December 2nd, 2020. So that's a very good mention. We may talk about something like that when we get to the miscellaneous categories for AEW when I do that stream coming up not too long away as well. But yeah, guys, again, about 45-minute stream, so time I thought it would be. Again, that's going to do it for this AEW special live stream. Again, the next time I come here live, again, we will be doing top 10 matches for AEW in 2020. Got a good list I'm prepared to present to you guys for sure. And again, it's going to do it. So guys, once again, what were some of your best storylines in 2020 for AEW? Do you agree with my list? Do you agree with my honorable mentions? Did you disagree? Do you have any worst storylines of the year you'd like to share? Again, I didn't really think of many besides the disappointing storyline between Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara, but we'll go from there. Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section below, guys. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to come on my channel. And follow me on Twitter at TheManAir23. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for my SmackDown review. And we'll go from there. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. Have a great night. Sleep tight, everybody. Peace out, everybody.